And we are back with more on Point Blank. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, my co-host, my compadre, the other half of this show, he's again out on special assignment. We're going to have to tease him because he's down in Atlanta, Courtney, this time. He's down there, and I want to tease him when he get back because he says he's doing a panel discussion down there. He's a host, BJ, of a panel discussion in Atlanta, and I'm going to tease him when he get back and make sure that he understands that he doesn't have a excuse for this absence. We want a written. Courtney, that's what I'm going to do. I said, bring back a written note. I said, bring back a written note, an excuse note. No, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a very interesting show today. In case you all have not noticed, and we have, that there is a new party in Missouri. And that party has candidates both in the race for the congressman in the 1st Congressional District, and they also have a candidate that is going to run in the Senate. And these candidates will be running as independent, so you won't see them in the primary, but you most definitely will see them on the ballot in November. And so we want to get both of them in. We're going to start off with the one that's running for the 1st Congressional District, Blake Ashby, and he is in the house with us today to talk about the Better Party and what he wants to do in the 1st Congressional District. And ladies and gentlemen, we may even allow him. BJ has a board over there for you folks on Facebook Live. He got a board that works all of the volume and all the other stuff. He won't let me work it, but Blake, I'm gonna see if he will let you touch it, the board, since he won't never let me touch it. But Blake, introduce yourself and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it. So my name is Blake Ashby. Been a resident of St. Louis for coming up on 40 years now. And, really just appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about issues for the 1st Congressional District. You had mentioned the Better Party. The Better Party was actually received official recognition just over a month and a half ago. We've got 2 candidates running. Jared Young will be running for Senate against Josh Hawley and Lucas Kuntz. And I am running for the 1st Congressional District against either Corey Bush or Wesley Bell, whichever one happens to win.
Got it. And do you have any background on what was the decision to come up with the Better Party and file as independent versus filing in the primary as either a Republican or a Democrat? Can you share something with us?
I think a lot of people in our country are really, really frustrated with the 2-party system. We've got the Democrats and the Republicans, and, each in their own way has kind of been taken over by extremists within their party. And it gets to the point where the primaries actually decide the elections and voters don't have a choice in November. So the idea behind the Better Party was if we could start a new party in the middle, that will have the effect over time of pulling both the Democrats and the Republicans back from the extremes and hopefully giving Missouri voters more choices in the middle. And really, the middle is where most people are. Most people are actually moderate, and most people generally agree on most issues. What gets lost in the anger and the vitriol from both sides is that compromise, that understanding in the middle. So hopefully the Better Party can help bring that back.
Now, do you believe that the discord that is going on between the 2 parties, you think it's like one responding to what they're getting from the other, or do you think both parties are just, adversarial against each other to the most upteen extreme simply because one is Democrat and one is Republican?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of those 2 things. There's definitely a lot of back and forth between the 2 parties. But anymore, it's Republicans attacking Republicans and Democrats attacking Democrats. And part of what has happened in both parties is as we have stepped away from people that know how to get things done. Lacey Clay was the representative before. And Lacy Clay was not a flashy person. He, wasn't out marching, making, threats, making speeches. Lacy Clay knew how to work behind the scenes and got things done. And, we have the same issue, or the Republicans have the same issues. They've got Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is way, way to the right. And at some point, the fringes in both parties become performative. They worry more about performing and getting hits on social media than actually getting something done in Congress. And, it's hurting our country.
It's interesting. You mentioned about the marching and the stuff like that, and they said Lacy didn't do it. But in reality, the first congressional district was born out of that sort of activism, and Bill Clay Sr. was definitely an activist in the African American community, especially when we start talking about the bank protest, the Jefferson Bank protest,
Absolutely,
and things like that. So it's not that unusual to have someone from the activist community to be active and advocating for the issues in the African American community and move up to political office. So I mean, Lacy didn't, but he didn't have to, because I think his daddy did all the work. And Lacy's a good friend of mine. He's my fraternity brother too, Kappa. But the fact that his daddy did the groundwork and laid all of that stuff out as relates to helping get us the first congressional district, I didn't think he needed to at that point in time. So
no, I think that's definitely a valid point, and different times demand different things. And one quick Bill Clay story: there was a St. Louis Globe Democrat back in the day.
I remember.
There was an editor, Bill Fustel, and he was talking to me one time about the senior Clay. And he had been arrested, so he was in the bus. And Fustel said to him, "What are you doing there?" And his comment was, "I'm running for Congress." So he, even back then, was using activism as a platform to gain attention to the issues. But I think that something that separates the older civil rights movement is that they didn't stop at the protests and the activism. Bill Clay went into office with an agenda of things he wanted to accomplish, and actually had the political cleverness and intelligence and relationship building to accomplish those. I have to say, one of the things we worry about is that on both sides, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, they stop at the controversy and don't try and find the common ground to actually bring real change. And, I'm not here to, as you say, we do not have a primary. But, frankly, the easiest way for the first district to start pulling the Democratic party back from the extremes is to vote for Wesley Bell in the primary. He is, in many ways, a traditional Democrat. He's the behind-the-scene guy. He gets things done. He's actually made real change as prosecuting attorney. And, that's one of the challenges. You've got a primary where you've got somebody who's kind of a traditional Democrat, very, very accomplished. I mean, just really, he is one of the most accomplished candidates we've had in a long time, versus somebody, at least in my opinion, my impression, she focuses more on the controversy than she does on progress.
It's interesting because you would be running against either one of them in there. So when you talk like that, some of us would think that it sounds like the old stalking horse situation.
No, not the least bit. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
I'm just saying, because you basically what you just said. It sounds like endorsement of Wesley Bell, but you're saying that you're going to run against him. So for you to file as independent in the first congressional district, aren't you saying that neither one of those candidates are better than you, and you can serve the district better? Aren't you basically saying that?
Well, so the reality is that nobody runs for office unless they think they would be the best person.
Sure.
And so even if Wesley wins the primary, I will still campaign. But, frankly, the campaign would be different. Because, and I've known Wesley Bell since before he was, a Ferguson council person. He is a thoughtful, well-spoken person who listens to everybody. And I don't agree with Wesley Bell on every issue, but I do know that Wesley Bell will listen to every side on every issue and make an informed decision. So, frankly, I would be better off if Cori Bush won the primary, because I would have a better chance in the general election. But the first district would be better off if Wesley Bell won the primary.
So if that would be three candidates running for the first congressional district in November, regardless of what happens in August. It'd be three candidates: a Republican candidate, a Democratic candidate, and the independent candidate.
And technically,
And
we're
you
the better
s-
party. So we're
and of course the first congressional district votes and leans heavily Democratic. Uh, and so, how do you feel the chances or the opportunity for somebody running as an independent to be successful running against both a Republican and a Democrat in the first congressional district? Because who do you envision as your base? Let me put it that way.
Well, and so that's one of the challenges for me is that my base are frustrated Democrats and frustrated Republicans and independents. And if Wesley Bell wins, my chances of winning in the general election go way down. If Cori Bush wins, there are a lot of people, a lot of moderate Democrats that are frustrated with her. I've got a lot of Democratic friends that are frustrated with how she has handled things in Congress and, frankly, what she hasn't gotten done. And, Congress is a tough beast, right? You're one of 435. You can't set the agenda. But the fact of the matter is that that candidates, that elected officials that know how to operate in the system can get things done. And Wesley Bell, again, it's a good example. He has done a nice job of reforming the prosecuting attorney's office while at the same time still fighting crime. So, again, I'm better off if Cori Bush wins. I've got a better chance against Cori Bush. And then my base will be
So help me out when you say that. Hold on, we're going to take a quick break. Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more on Point Black. And we are back, folks. We have Blake Ashby, independent, member of the Better Party, running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District. And Blake, you made a comment. You said that you think that your chances of winning the 1st Congressional District are better if you take on Cori Bush as a candidate versus Wesley Bell.
Correct.
And so I'm trying to understand, I really want to peel the onion back on why you think that your chances of winning are better taking on Cori Bush. I'm trying to understand the math because you are white, for ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it shouldn't matter, but he is white. Race shouldn't matter, but it does. Let's just, so I'm just trying to, and more likely the Republican candidate who wins on the Republican side is going to be white.
I think there are a couple of blacks running on the Republican side.
More likely than not, the Republican that wins on the first in the primary is going to be white.
So the math is, right, if Cori Bush wins, there are going to be a lot of Wesley Bell supporters that are really, really angry. And if you're a moderate Republican in the 1st district, there's no chance the Republicans are going to win the 1st district. I am actually I am in the middle. I'm not a hard right. I'm not a hard left. I'm in the middle. I'm progressive on social issues, conservative on economic issues. I'm a safe vote for Democrats because if they elect me, I've actually got a better chance of voting with the Democratic leadership than Cori Bush does because she regularly votes against the Democratic leadership just to make a point. I would actually be representing the interests of the 1st district, not progressives nationwide, the 1st district. And so that gives me a chance to pick up moderate Democrats. I've got a chance to pick up moderate Republicans, and I've got a chance to get the independents in the middle. So,
when you say she votes regularly against the party, I just want to make sure because we don't have the fact checkers that iHeart has not provided for me up here. They gave me a great producer by Dr. DJ. But Dr. BJ, can we get a fact checker up in there that has the computer real quick? Ladies and gentlemen, you can't see him, but he says, heck no. But I'm trying. I haven't looked at the voting record per se as relates to the totality of votes taken versus which votes were along party lines and which votes weren't. Is that something you're saying you've looked at and you feel good about, or is it something that there have been some votes that are well publicized because of the issue, and the Congresswoman voted a contest, but I don't know if that represents, from a percentage standpoint, the totality of votes she's voted while she's been in the office.
So fair point.
I just don't want to give it. I just don't want. Well,
no, and as you're saying, right? Most votes, she votes with the Democratic Party.
Okay.
Periodically, for high-profile votes, she does not vote for the party. But in my opinion, she limits her effectiveness by the strategy she's chosen. And I think that a candidate that is more able to work inside the system and, frankly, knows North County better. I personally have been on the Ferguson City Council. I've had to pass a budget. Wesley Bell has been on the Ferguson City Council. He had to pass a budget. Criminal justice reform was not some esoteric issue for him. He was actually in the prosecutor's office trying to make real things happen.
And you were on the council at the time?
I was on the council for 1 year, recently.
Okay.
Yeah. But so the issue is, how do we move our country forward? Who is the most effective representative for the first district? And I do not believe it's her.
So let's talk platform for a minute. What is it, as a successful candidate in Congress, you believe it takes to move our country forward? What is your platform? What are the issues you really would like to tackle as a member of Congress?
Well, so one of the challenges for our country is we've got this, and my wife's not close enough to kick me in the shin so I can talk about this, democratic capitalism. If you go back in our history, there was an intellectual battle between socialism on the one side and unregulated capitalism on the other side. And our country chose a compromise. We chose something called democratic capitalism, where we stuck with the free market, but we moderated the free market with democracy to ensure everybody benefited, everybody got in the game, and everybody played by the same set of rules. One of the challenges for our country is that we have slipped away from that compromise. We have slipped away from support for unions. We've slipped away from support for public education. We have second sets of rules for financial institutions. All of that is hurting our country. We need to get back to democratic capitalism.
You sound like a progressive now.
Well,
not independent. I'm just saying,
yeah.
When you believe that's a progressive platform?
Well, in 1910, that was the progressive platform. The progressive movement invented democratic capitalism 100 years ago. But if you listen to a progressive today, they are, frankly, socialists. They talk about socialism. They talk about state ownership of things. And so one of the reasons I'm running, people ask me, well, if Wesley wins, what are you going to do with the election? Because I'm not going to attack Wesley personally. He's a good person. I'm not going to attack him personally. I will spend my time talking about the progressive movement and how the progressive movement has lost sight of what we need to do in our country to make it work better for everybody.
Yeah, but when you make statements like, I'm not going to say anything bad about him, I'm just going to concentrate on these issues here versus running a campaign to be successful, my listeners will hear that and say that, hey, if Wesley wins as an independent, you're going to basically roll over.
Nope.
I mean, that's what I'm just saying. That's how that's going to be perceived. And so, getting back to this progressive though, if you feel today that the progressives are socialists, you win in the 1st Congressional District. The city of St. Louis, I know for a fact, has the most progressive platform and leadership than it's ever had in its existence. Mm-hmm. From the President Board of Aldermen, the mayor, several members of the Board of Aldermen. So the city, which means that what you just said would be in conflict in most cases with the leadership of the city of St. Louis, which makes up a very big piece of the 1st Congressional Districts. I mean,
but I would qualify that, right? Because Tashara Jones is absolutely progressive when she's talking, but she's running a city and she's doing a lot of things the old-fashioned way and just making sure things work. And
that's an opinion, though, right?
Well, it's my opinion.
Okay,
right?
I mean that's
fair enough.
I was going to say, if you can back that up with some examples, I'd be interested in hearing that.
Well, she hasn't defunded police, for one example.
Okay. Okay.
And it's a challenge. So both of our parties are out of whack, and nothing illustrates that as much as healthcare. Just a change in direction.
But I don't want to leave the fact that if the city leadership is primarily the President Board of Aldermen is progressive. Rasheed Aldridge, who was in the House, is now in the Board of Aldermen. Sonia, there are a number. Most folks will say that the Progressive Party represents the leadership. At minimum, the legislative body is majority progressive, and they fought hard to move and get these people in there. So if the city is run primarily by progressive leadership, especially at the legislative side, and you're the person who wins in the first congressional district, doesn't that put you sort of philosophically in conflict with, and to be in conflict with those?
No.
Okay.
So let me give you an example. Rasheed Aldridge, when he was with the Missouri House. So, a friend of mine, do you know Jamie Dennis by chance with the Urban League?
Yes.
Yeah. So Jamie Dennis and I, prior to Michael Brown, we started the program called Urban Capitalism, and we teach teenagers about capitalism.
Okay.
And there's nothing else like it out there. We've been doing it at McClure for the last 5 years with a break for COVID. Rasheed actually put money into the Missouri state budget to fund the Urban Capitalism program and help extend the education on capitalism to urban youth. Unfortunately, the Mike Parsons line itemed it out and did not give us that money. But my point is that Aldridge is obviously very progressive in terms of social justice, in terms of equality, in terms of equity, but he is also a hard-nosed realist that recognizes that if we can't teach our youth to succeed in the economy we have, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They will fail. And, there's a phrase, equity, right? How do we help people build equity? Equity is a phrase of capitalism. Equity is something you can accumulate under capitalism. Yes. So even while he is very progressive, and obviously you identify him as progressive, he is also
he identifies himself as progressive. Him and the president of the board of aldermen. I mean, they would tell you they're progressive now.
Yeah, but at the same time, he was doing things to advance capitalism, advance economic literacy for youth that was not part of the progressive agenda. Right?
Oh, you don't think that? Well, we won't debate whether that. I don't know how I'm going to say. You don't think educating youth as relates to your program out there is not a progressive move?
It's not a traditional one because the progressive movement, for whatever reason, has turned against capitalism.
Got it.
In my opinion, right? Everything's in my opinion.
Got it.
But the fact of the matter is, there is no other option than capitalism. Socialism, historically, every time they have tried socialism in the world, it has collapsed. When they've tried democratic socialism, they voted out the socialism part. The only answer is moderated capitalism. And until the progressive movement embraces democratic capitalism, it's going to continue to have problems.
So this moderate capitalism, as a member of Congress, what would that platform look like that you would be pushing as a member of Congress to try to help the country? So I'm just trying to get some examples of what that would look like.
Yeah. Well, and so if you look at the role of government, one of those roles is something called the arbiter of claims. The role of the government is to keep people from lying to people, right? But every week I get a phone call that starts off with a tiny lie. I look at my caller ID and say, 314, that must be somebody I know. I pick up the phone, and it's somebody from a different continent. So every week, I get a phone call that starts with a little tiny lie. And there was a time when the federal government recognized that part of its role was to make sure people didn't lie to people so that we could have, transparency in commerce. So that's just one example of a little thing, right? And everybody wants the big, giant answers. The fact of the matter is that social change is rarely a giant issue. It's normally the cumulative impact of hundreds or thousands of smaller decisions. And that's one example. Why is it that we count on Facebook and Google to protect us from online fraud? Why doesn't the federal government do that? It certainly could. And so in example after example, there are little tiny ways we have stepped back from democratic capitalism, stepped back from moderation, that if we move forward on those, we're going to make our society safer, and we're going to give more individuals the ability to control their lives, because that really is what it's all about, is self-determination.
Interesting. And how would that play in with your foreign policy positions?
So one of the things that George W. Bush got right was that we do need to support democracy. People talk about the international trade model. The international trade model only works if all nations are democratic. So we've got a situation now where we've got a democratic United States and a dictatorship in China, And because of that dictatorship, the middle class in China can't grow and doesn't develop as a market for our products. So I do believe that at some level protectionism is needed to protect us from non-democratic countries that are undermining their own people and undermining our economy.
Got it. So of course we know the first congressional district is primarily African American, and it represents demographically, economically, African Americans from all sectors. Some that are doing very well, a lot in the middle, and just as many that are poor or would be in the lower income categories. And of course, all throughout the region, African American children are reading below levels that they should not be. Of course, the crime rate in the African American community is out the kilt. And when we talk about African American health care and all these things, so what have you looked at those issues and you have some thoughts about how you would tackle those issues as the congressman for the first congressional district?
Absolutely. I got more opinions than you have time. I think that's pretty safe to say.
Well, you know what? I don't own iHeart, but BJ, can you get us extra time?
There you go. Give us more.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you can't see him. He did that heck no again.
Yeah.
He did.
Well, so, just as a starting point, there's something called bubble up economics, and we need to get back to bubble up economics, right?
Explain it, bubble up economics.
Bubble up economics. If you put money in the hands of working people, they will spend it, and it bubbles up through the economy, creating value for everybody.
Okay.
And that really is the core of democratic capitalism. Then, back in the day, that was the core of the Democratic Party, right? Let's put money in the hands of working people. They will spend that, and by spending that, they improve their situation and they create economic activity. So that's an example of one of the things that we've gotten away from. But part of the challenge is we do not have good conversations on race. Back in the day, I was part owner of something called the Del Mar Lounge in University City on the Loop. I don't know if you remember that or not.
No, but it was on the Loop. It had fun. People had fun.
For a long time, it was actually one of the most integrated bars in St. Louis.
Okay.
A guy named Doug Morgan started it. He's got a place called Saturn Lounge down in Soulard now. It's just spectacular. But I say that, right? It was one of the most integrated places in St. Louis, right? And I actually had somebody say to me one time, "You're mighty white to own the Del Mar," right? Because you look at me, right? I look like an FBI agent. And I've looked like an FBI agent since I was 20 years old. There's nothing I can do about it. But so I say that, right? We know we have racial issues, and yet we have a hard time talking about racial issues because there's this fear, on both sides. Because of the extremism on both sides, it's harder to have a conversation in the middle. And so part of what we need to do is we need to have a more honest conversation about race, right? And that's easier to say than to do. Here's an example, right? If I were to say to you, we need to ensure that Ferguson remains a diverse city, you'll probably say yes.
Okay.
If I were to say to you, we need to make sure the white people don't leave Ferguson, some people are going to kind of set back, right? Because they actually mean about the same thing, but one of those is in language that we accept, and one of those is in language that we find challenging. But this also illustrates the problem of phrasing everything in race, because the challenge for Ferguson is not the white people leaving. The challenge for all of North County is the middle class people leaving. One of the things that got lost in the unrest of Ferguson is that Ferguson was a mecca for the black middle class. It was one of the first communities that welcomed African Americans into its fold, and actually, made it possible for successful African Americans to buy a home and live in a really nice neighborhood. And unfortunately, all across North County, we have issues with law and order, with civility. And it's not just it's not white people are leaving, it's the middle class that's leaving. There was one of the most, at least in Ferguson, most well-known protesters just railed on society, blah, blah, blah. Then we found out she lived in St. Charles. She was part of the white flight, black flight, and left North City, and she didn't move to North County. She moved all the way to St. Charles, where she trusted the schools. And so this is my point, right, is that we need to have a conversation about race, but talking about race is a really hard thing to do, because as long as there are extremists on both sides, it's easy for them to just jump into that conversation and try and turn it into something it's not.
Well, the the unique thing is that I know somebody's going to help me in a minute because it either was the last census or the one before that. And I'm thinking it's the 2020 census where they said that over 20,000 or some odd people moved within the first congressional district.
Yeah.
Which means they moved from one part of congressional district to another part of congressional district. And my assumption was because we lost so many people in the city, there were primary African Americans moving to North County. And so it's interesting that to say that we're losing the black middle class. So if those folks who left the city that moved out to North County did not represent the black middle class because it was such a big chunk of people that moved, that means they were people that, for all lacking terms, I use the word poor. People think you mean destitute. No, we just mean that
working class. Yeah.
They're working class people. Yeah. So what would you do to uplift them? Or is it because if we were able to keep the current middle class African Americans that are in North County there, that still doesn't address the issue of the 2/3 of the African American community that are not in the middle class that are in North County. So my question is, from a platform standpoint, how do we get them in the bubble up economy, as you call it, bubble up capitalism, where they really benefit from it?
Well, and it's a lot of little things, right? I mean, again, there is no silver bullet that fixes everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's improvements in streets, it's improvements in public safety, it's making it easier for people to go to a trade school in addition to go to college. It's lots of little things that have an impact. And Lacey Clay's legacy will be that Defense Mapping Agency up in North County.
NGA.
National Geospace, right?
Right.
That right there is exactly the kind of economic development we need in North County to be able to pull up everybody. Because, not only, and I know the property developer made a lot of money off of that, but what they're doing is they're creating a lot of jobs in North County, and people will tend to move locally. But race continues to be something we have to talk about, and we're not doing a good job of that. And just to pick one example, when the Ferguson report came out,
mm-hmm.
There was a section in there that dealt with police officers arresting young black men for walking in a manner.
Yes.
But the other side of that was that African American homeowners were calling the police department to say, hey, these kids are blocking the street. So my wife and I were part of the neighborhood policing group after Michael Brown,
mm-hmm.
and we did surveys with literally over 400 homeowners or community members, mostly homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
And uniformly, what they said about the police was they didn't want less policing; they wanted better policing. And in Ferguson, without getting too deep into it, Ferguson had community policing for a good decade, and then in 2011, they changed from community policing to revenue-focused policing. They changed their deployments to put more cops on the streets to give people more tickets.
Yes, they did.
And the neighbors, the African-American neighbors, complained that there were fewer police in the street because suddenly they weren't there to make sure things were safe, and they weren't there to, one woman said, to hassle that house up the street that has all the parties. And so my point is, right, if I say to you, cops are arresting young black men, you're going to say that's a terrible thing. But should black homeowners have the right to call the police and expect the police to treat their concerns just as they would treat concerns from white homeowners? And hold your thought.
We're going to do one more break. We have to pay. Make sure that the station gets paid. Ain't that right, BJ? He ain't going to say nothing, ladies and gentlemen, because we get him in trouble then. But we'll be right back with more on Point Black. And we're back in the studio with Blake Ashby, candidate for congressman, 1st Congressional District, as an independent under
Better Party.
Better Party. Ladies and gentlemen, but you mentioned about this thing with the police, which is a very interesting conversation. But early on, I remember you said something about that Tashara did not defund the police, so she's not a progressive. So, are you in favor of defunding the police?
No.
You're not. Okay.
No.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. But would that be a? So let me ask the question differently. I'm working on a speech, and I wrote in there is one of the basis of the discussion is we're talking about freedom. It's a Juneteenth speech, and I talk about the fact that I said freedom. The paradox is freedom, having freedom that gives you the freedom to take away the freedom of others.
Yep.
I mean, that's the ultimate freedom, when you had the freedom to take other people's freedom. And so when you mentioned about the situation where the neighbors, they're complaining because the kids are in the street, and of course it's keeping them from traversing in their cars to get into their house, or they just don't want a bunch of kids out in front of their house. I can understand that. And the kids in the street, and so they both have rights.
Yep.
But whose rights are at the top to allow you to take away the rights of others?
Absolutely. Well,
that's a. I mean, can you fix that in Congress?
Well, we can start, right? But
Right.
It's an old saying, right?
Right.
The right to swing your fist ends at my nose.
Ah, okay.
And so one of the challenges we have is that we've stepped back from civil society. We live in a residential neighborhood. Dodge Chargers sometimes drive by at 2 o'clock in the morning, with their, they put it in low gear and, the engine.
Yeah.
That's, and so that is hurting civil society. So part of what's happened is we've stepped back from respect for other people's rights. And that's one of the reasons people are moving out of North City and North County is that, it's interesting. There is no racial bias when it comes to lawn care. I can tell you for a fact that a middle-class African-American couple is just as obsessed about their lawn as a middle-class white couple. Right? There is no difference. As you move up in class and move up in wealth, you worry more about your things. You try to take care of your things. And so we've got this situation where we have stepped back from that idea, and we're letting people swing their fists, and people are getting punched in the nose more. And so we need to go back to that concept that this is a civil society. We have to figure out how to, live here together. We have to figure out how to respect the rights of everybody. And, Ferguson's got a great new police chief, Troy Doyle. And, he's got a phrase, constitutional policing. We need good constitutional policing. Those African-American homeowners have every right to be safe in their homes, to be peaceful in their homes, to not have to worry about anything. They're the same, if you go out to Creve Coeur someplace where it's more white.
I'm going to let you in on a secret, because the comment that, as you move up in wealth, you care more about your things.
You've got the ability to take better care of them. I know poor people
care
about their things.
I'm going to say, because the income status, they care about their things, and I never forget something my grandmother told me one day when we had to go over her house when we were young and clean the washboards around the house and this and that. I remember one time I was complaining, and she said, "There's no excuse for filth."
There's no excuse for filth.
And so I live by that. But I think, in regards to where people are at, what's happening now and it brings it's a great segue to talk about households, because at the end of the day, people in households and they're struggling financially, and they don't have the ability to give the attention to the things that they need to get attention to. But how is that something we can fix in Congress, or that's more of a local issue for the state house, the state senate, and the aldermen or council people or stuff like that? Is that a congressional issue?
It's a combination of things. Just to pick one program, Section 8 housing has an option to where a person can buy the home after a period of time. That has not been implemented in the city of St. Louis. So if you're a Section 8 renter in the city of St. Louis, you do not have the option of eventually buying your house using that Section 8 money. Why not? It's something we should be doing.
Well, actually, we are. I mean, the housing authority may not be doing it, but the developers are doing lease purchase with Section 8. We are doing it. But the housing authority is not. I agree.
Yeah. And so that's an example of a program that's not going to affect 1,000 people, but it might affect 50 people or 100 people. I mean, that really is the answer. There is no global answer because everybody's situation is different.
Right.
But that's an example of how we could make it easier for people to own a home. Another example is if you are in private real estate, there's something called a like-kind exchange. And so I can buy a property and then I can flip that property to somebody else and not pay tax as long as I buy it.
Right.
We could use something similar to that for the HUD housing. We could make it easier for people to buy homes from the St. Louis Equity Fund is one of the big funders.
Right, it's a big funder of it, yes.
Yeah. Yes. And so right now, if you're funded by the St. Louis Equity Fund, they can't sell that home for 15 years. But if you implemented like-kind exchanges, even for a HUD-funded house, somebody could live there for 3 years and say, I want to buy my home. And then the developer would say, okay, well, I've got to buy another home in that same block, and I'll fix that one up. And so you create a mechanism, not a giant mechanism, right, but a tiny mechanism that makes home ownership available to more people. And really, equity is the key. Nothing matters. I don't say nothing matters, but we have to give people the ability to accumulate their own equity. That really is the path to freedom in the United States of America. Go ahead.
And in Congress, will you be pro-choice or pro-life?
Pro-choice.
Pro-choice. Oh.
I am, my wife's not close enough to kick me. You say, like, only so many controversial topics at a time, right? If you're talking about race, you can't be talking about abortion, too. But, the fact of the matter is that women deserve the right to choose.
Absolutely.
And in my opinion, the pro-life movement is undermining organized religion. If you look at why people are backing away from religion, the young people will tell you it's because of hypocrisy. And one of the greatest hypocrisies is the pro-life movement, because we don't talk about it, but 30 to 40%, if we consider a life begins at conception, right? That's what they say. And I believe that, right? Scientifically, that is true. 30 to 40% of those lives die in the first month to 45 days. So if God really does value every unborn child, then why does God allow so many to die? And the harsh reality is that
she did not want you to say that.
She did not want me to say that, but it's out there.
That's interesting.
But so we have to maybe the fact that maybe the pro-life movement cares more about the unborn than God does. And the reason I say that is because I am a strong believer in organized religion. One of the challenges for our society is that we have backed away from conscious faith, and I believe we need conscious faith. And so everybody says, oh, well, it's, I've got lots of right-wing friends, so this is me speaking for them, not myself. Oh, it's the LGBTQ that's taking us away from religion. No, the homosexuals I know are God-fearing people that want to go to church, right? What's taking us away from religion is hypocrisy. And unfortunately, the pro-life movement comes across as hypocritical because of their insistence on essentially taking away the rights of women, women's right to choose.
Got it. Criminal justice, especially criminal justice reform.
Tough subject, right?
Yeah, very.
But again, it's a situation where we are not having the honest conversation we need to have. And I'm going to pick something, and this will be my third one. Once again, she's too far to kick me. Something like a chokehold, right? That's a very controversial subject. But the fact of the matter is that a chokehold is on a continuum of force. And if you take the chokehold out of the arsenal of police officers, they will go to shooting people sooner. And there is a state senator, Brian Williams.
Yeah, Brian. Know him very well.
Okay. So Brian,
he's a great Kappa. He's a fraternity brother. So
oh, really?
I always had to plug that in.
Well, and so he was the person who led the reforms of chokehold policies here in Missouri.
Yes.
And he did that in a very measured and very rational way, right? He didn't do the protest, chokeholds are always bad, blah, blah, blah. He actually looked at the need of policing. He looked at the continuum of force, and he came up with a compromise that was implemented in law. And he was able to do that because he stepped beyond the acrimony and he stepped beyond the public comments and actually looked at the reality of the situation.
But Blake, wait a minute. Wait a minute. But he did it at the end of a significant movement in this country as a result of George Floyd, as a result of dealing with the chokeholds. There was stuff introduced at the national level, Black Lives Matter. There was a tremendous amount of protests across the country and stuff against chokeholds. And so, of course, he rode that wave, and I'm not saying he shouldn't have, he should have. But without that protest and without that other public activism, that bill never would have had the snowball's chance in hell of getting out of out of the Republican-controlled House and Senate. It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, no two ways about it, right?
Yeah.
What happens in our society eventually gets reflected in Congress.
Right.
But my point was that, Brian Williams did not pick a side. He picked the truth, and he found a compromise that recognized the needs of police, right? And that's the thing, right? There are compromises available. It is possible to have real conversations about race. A simpler one, right? When somebody says to me, I'm colorblind. Well, obviously the goal of our country is that people are not treated differently based on their race, but you can't get to colorblind unless you're first color aware. Because we are a data-driven country, and if we do not track the impact of race, if we are not aware of race to be able to track it, we will never know if we're colorblind or not.
Got you. I'm going to let you in with that because they're giving me the sign. We're running out of time. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Blake, for coming in and having a conversation with us. There was a lot of things I'm quite sure our listeners learned from the conversation, and we do appreciate you taking out your time.
Yep. And so let me just say real quick, you said, if rolling over, right, if Wesley Bell wins, I'm going to spend my time asking him uncomfortable questions. And he is a smart enough man, he will be able to answer them. But we need to pull back the covers and have a real conversation about race. And, that will be my role if Wesley Bell wins the primary, is I'm going to do my best to advance that conversation, put Wesley on the spot, and make him say what he believes on these issues.
But you didn't say do your best to win. I'm going to leave it at that.
I will do my best to win, but it's much more of a long shot against Wesley Bell because even a lot of my friends will vote for him. That's the challenge, right?
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.